All right, we are here with Scott Edwards. Scott is the guinea pig of this project. I wanted to interview Scott first because his Patreon show, the Five Star Joshi Show, I think is I sort of see it as the kind of the hook for the Patreon, and it is a show that has been on the Patreon for a long time now. Originally, it was Parker and Scott, and since then Scott has taken over. So what are we doing here? I was interested in providing some content for the Patreon, though at some point this video will also go to the main YouTube channel, but we'll probably just keep it on Patreon for a couple weeks. And the idea was like, hey, like we have all of these podcasts, we have all of these shows, and I wanted to talk to the podcasters themselves, get some insight from them, the audience. Think of myself as kind of a liaison to the audience. What is it about Scott and wrestling that just vibes together? So that's kind of what we're going to do here is get to know the podcaster of your favorite show on the Fight Game Media Network. And I thought Scott was the perfect guy. So Scott, what is up?
Not much. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be a guinea pig. That sounds fun to me.
Well, and look, the other part of this is not only is this going to be for the Patreon, so the people who are such loyal subscribers and who just month in and month out are there for us, but at some point, we will put this on the free YouTube channel. And if anybody is interested in learning about Scott, like, oh my gosh, where did this Joshi guy come from? Then there will be something there like hey, get to know Scott Edwards and Scotty wrestling. So that's kind of the thing. I think there's a two-way street here, one for the audience and then one also for the podcaster. So because I know Scott is available and open to do a bunch of other things out there if you are interested in having him on your platform.
I like staying busy until I'm actually busy, as I like to say.
All right, so I think this will probably be the first question for every one of these I do, and I do want to do them with every single podcaster that we have on our network. What is your first ever pro wrestling memory?
That's a good one. I'm not gonna count SmackDown versus Raw 2007 because that was just like a game that I thought was fake people. Didn't know they were real. So it would probably be No Way Out 2007. That's the first wrestling show I ever watched. I vividly remember the Undertaker and Batista teaming against John Cena and Shawn Michaels. They were doing like the
the pre-WrestleMania,
the
pre-WrestleMania.
The rest of the cards really bad, so don't look at it. But I remember that because I really liked Cena and Undertaker, and my cousins liked the opposite. So they liked HBK and Batista. So I won at WrestleMania. I just want everyone to know that. I ended up having a good day. But yeah, that was my first memory, and I've been hooked ever since.
And as for some of the people who are hearing this, Scott just made all of us feel very old. But so here, this is interesting that the video game is kind of what attracted you because as of our recording, AEW's video game is about to release in a couple of days. And I was talking to one of my podcast partners, Andrew Zarian, kind of about, is it going to hook people? And it's really targeting, somebody who is a little bit older than it doesn't seem to be targeting the kids as much as some of the WWE toys and video games are. But that is an interesting thing where not wrestling, but wrestling adjacent attracted you to wrestling. That's pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah, I got the game out of when they used to have like video stores back in the day. They don't have those anymore. And I played it. I was hooked. I played it again and again and again. It took me a few months to actually realize I think it was real until like my dad was like, these all these people are real. I was like, no. And I guess I was just lost in the characters in the game, which is pretty cool.
That's actually pretty amazing. So what? I don't want you to necessarily share your age if you're not comfortable, but like how old are you at this point? Like you can even give me a range if you want.
Oh, I'm 24 now. So back then I was when the game come out, end of 2006, right? I think that's how those games released back then.
Yeah.
So I was 7, about to turn 8, I believe.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I can't believe I've been a fan this long. Like when it was like 15 years of being a fan, I was like, it's been a lot. I've changed a lot since when I first started,
Yeah, I'm
and
sure your
wrestling's
interest.
changed a lot
Yeah.
too, though.
And, again, Scott is probably making a lot of us feel old. So you're 24,
Yeah.
and my oldest turns 24 in 2 days
How about that?
as of this recording. There you go.
How about that?
All right. Enough about making us feel old. Let's we do have a couple of questions from Patreon subscribers that I did get, but I just kind of wanted to, your history. Like obviously WWE is your entry into wrestling, and now where you are today, where you're pretty much watching everything, but um, you also watch a couple of more niche shows, and you cover Joshi. So what's the point A of WWE to where you are now? Like, how do you get there? How do you get to all of a sudden you're like the Joshi guy?
That's a good question because I still am shocked that I am sometimes. But I was WWE diehard fan, really positive about the product for a very long time. Like that was until probably 2018. But before that, I had gotten into New Japan, Ring of Honor a little bit. That when the Kenny Okada match happened, I know for a lot of people it's the Omega Jericho match. That's pretty much this is how AEW got created. But for
Right.
me, it was that first Okada Kenny match because I remember being online enough. I wasn't fully like on Twitter and stuff, but I was online enough to see everyone raving about it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, Meltzer, of course, rated it as high as he did,
Yeah.
and I was like, I mean, all I knew was what 5 stars was. Like that's about all I knew. So when I heard about a match that was rated higher than 5 stars, I was like, I probably should watch that. And I've really enjoyed New Japan ever since. I've enjoyed pretty much everything, but I've mostly still was WWE. AEW came around in 2019, of course, and that's when I was really breaking out to everything. I was still watching New Japan at the time, not as much as I do now. But when AEW came around, it felt like a new chance because I was falling a little bit out of WWE, wasn't
Mm-hmm.
loving what was going on.
We all were pretty
Yeah.
much.
So the interesting thing is, at the start of 2020, I think we all kind of hit the wall with wrestling, right?
Yeah.
When everyone lost their crowds, I thought I was going to stop watching wrestling altogether. And it was at the very beginning. I have some friends. I'll shout out at least Alex Richards. Alex Richards gave me this list of matches from Stardom because Io Shirai was my favorite wrestler
Right.
at the time. I never really was like, I'm gonna go watch Joshi. I just loved Io Shirai. I thought she was doing great stuff in NXT. And NXT, by the way, was also like my lifeblood for a lot of years there.
Yeah.
When they were hot, that was some of my favorite wrestling memories. I went to a few NXT shows. I went to Full Sail a few times.
Yeah.
I wish I could tell people to go there. They don't do it anymore. It's different now. It's the PC's different.
Yeah.
But I started watching Stardom from the very beginning. I got this whole list. It was in chronological order from the very opening to up to date. And I have been hooked ever since. I have been, some could say addicted, some could say locked in. And I've done all I can to make that promotion my most knowledgeable. I still have so much, and I admit this, I still have so much to learn about the history of Joshi. I have like a whole list of like a lot of Meltzer's ratings from the 80s and 90s because I think that's the best way to learn.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been locked in ever since. How I went from here to here, I guess Io Shirai, That's probably the best. That's probably the best way of saying it. Her being in WWE was the launching point because I was this close to not wanting to really watch wrestling anymore at the start of 2020 when there were no crowds. I just was. It was just so painful. I'm so grateful that we're where we are now.
That's amazing that you were that close.
Yeah.
So do you think, like, obviously the wrestling field of whether you're a writer or you do content, it's just a crowded field because I think what we all sort of realized is, podcasting and video stuff, like there is an early entry fee and
Mhm.
lots of hours to develop,
Yeah.
but there are so many more tools today to just really get you going than, than a few years ago. I remember, so this would be 2008 or 2009. For me, I was like, oh, like this podcast thing, I kind of know how to do it, but
Mhm.
the distribution piece is really missing. Like, I don't understand how to really distribute it all
Yeah.
that much. So I just didn't. I was just doing it for reps. And then you figure out, 2016 ish. I was like, oh, okay. Like, let's figure out the distribution piece. Um, now all that stuff is fairly easy. You don't really even need to know a whole lot to get these things going. But like I said, the field is crowded. Everybody who's halfway smart about wrestling kind of has a podcast, and so knowing that, do you consider Joshi kind of like your way to stand out? And do you actually find that to be an advantage for you as a podcaster? Because while everybody and their mom has a podcast about WWE, there's not that many podcasts about Joshi.
Yeah, absolutely. I tried the WWE AEW podcast thing. I did by myself once upon a time. Just it's a race you're not going to win unless you're connected to something bigger. It's a tough race. And when I got into Joshi, truthfully, the whole mindset when I got into Joshi was I'm going to keep this separate. I'm just going to enjoy it to enjoy it. That's all I wanted to do with it. And little time goes on and on. I'm starting to write a little bit about it, not too much anything, and the podcast idea came about. Me and Parker started up the 5 Star Joshi Show, and I mean now I'm here. I'm on this. Obviously, I've been with Fight Game Media now for it's about to be 2 years, I think,
Yeah.
which is pretty crazy. Um, and I'm with Fightful now, of course, covering Joshi, interviewing Joshi wrestlers. I'm doing a lot of things that I never dreamt of, but yeah, it's been a route that I definitely think has given me a chance to blossom as opposed to, if I just stuck with WWE and AEW. I think a lot of people find their own way with that for sure. And I can talk about those at any time, and I still do. But I think there's also a passion for me more with informing about Joshi. I always said if my entire role is this is just to make people watch, that's good enough for me. I don't need the, you know, I don't need the clout
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. I
Mm-hmm.
just want people to watch this great product that I very much believe in. And I think that's what all wrestling fans should do. I think we live in a wrestling world now where it's so negative. It's almost like people are trying to push, you know, fans away from products instead of bring them in. And that's what I'm trying to do. And, when Mercedes Monet came over, for example, that was like, look,
Yeah.
she came here. That means you should be watching it. But yeah, it's absolutely given me a chance to kind of be my own and make it my own in a lot of ways, and I love every second of it.
The idea that pro wrestling fandom is almost like an exclusive membership sometimes, because like you said, they're trying to push people away. It kind of reminds me of other small things, and the two things that I can sort of think about here are kind of the punk rock scene and like the late 70s. UFC, if you
Mm,
were following MMA in the early 2000s, there was a group of people who had kind of been there from the beginning, and you were not accepted into this club as a new fan because they didn't want you. They wanted MMA to stay underground. And with some of the, WWE is a giant company, so I don't think it exists there. But yeah, like to be a wrestling fan whose opinions are considered and whose opinions matter, you have to actually have a lot of knowledge of product. And if you do not showcase that knowledge of product, I can see it could be kind of intimidating to join, which is kind of why we have this Discord, right? Is we want the discourse to happen, and we want people to be able to come to a place that's pretty safe to talk about things. And now, we all have debates in here and there, and people get frustrated just like anywhere else. But that is an interesting thing about fandom. And do you find the Joshi product in general, because it is smaller, is it a little bit more open armed as far as the fan base than some of the other stuff, or is it an exclusive membership?
It depends on who, and when I say that, we just got past Forbidden Door as of this recording, and as someone that covers Stardom as much as I do, the AEW Stardom stuff comes up, and I think that's where it gets really. It's not as welcoming as I think you want it to be, but at the same time, it's on one side, people saying, "Oh, this wrestler should come here and lose," and this wrestler should come here and lose, and then it becomes a battle. I think it's very welcoming if you're talking to the right people who actually care for the product. There are always going to be, as the word goes, gatekeepers for these promotions because they want it to be theirs, right? They don't want it to change too much.
Yeah.
But there's a reality here where Stardom's growing and they're going to be fans. So why not help them than push them away? That's how these promotions grow. That's how they become bigger. That's how bigger opportunities happen. And that's how wrestlers ultimately stay because these promotions get popular. That means more money. That means more money for talent. It's things like that. I'm not saying the next, 5 fans that come over because of Mercedes Moné is going to, start paying wrestlers, but it's the little things like that. When Mercedes was here, for example, I saw a lot of new fans come in because they wanted to see her wrestle. And a lot of them have stuck around. A lot of her, I believe it's crew. I think that's what they call her fans, the crew. A lot of them have stuck around because they saw women's wrestling that matched what Mercedes Moné has been doing for years, if not sometimes better. And I think that's what people should have when it comes to Joshi. Have open arms, because if they learn, it's how the product gets better. It's how more people talk about it. It's how you get them to that next level. Yeah, Stardom's number 2 in Japan, but New Japan's still king by a lot. That's just the reality. And I think the more you welcome, the better it is. That's how, and you have better conversations. I'm not always right about all my opinions. I would like to think I was, but I'm not, and that's how, you get this discourse, like you said, but they can be conversations where, oh, you learn that. That's a lot less than, say, the AEWs of the world, right? There's discourse every day with AEW, but in those conversations, at least people are going back and forth learning, and that means they're talking about the product. So the more I can help people get in, and I hope this is what other people feel, that have Stardom podcast or Joshi podcast. I hope that's what they're doing, because if you're doing a podcast to alienate an audience, what's the point?
Yep. Okay, going back to your Omega Okada fandom and just kind of seeing the discourse around that match. So you would have been in high school still, correct?
What year was it? 2016?
I think so.
17? Yeah, I was in high school. I remember seeing how long the match was. I was like, what? Because WWE at the time, they didn't do long matches like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I'll watch it. Happily watched it. And I was like, I was amazed in a lot of ways, because the only New Japan match I'd seen before that was AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura when they were both coming to WWE. And I was amazed by that too, but I didn't stick around because they left. Right. So it's like, I have no reason to stick around if they're not there anymore. that Kenny and Okada match opened my eyes. That opened my eyes to the Elite, specifically Kenny. I've always been a big Kenny Omega
Yeah.
fan. I think a lot of people are by now. And yeah, I was in high school at the time, and I was amazed at just what I was watching. I still took a little to get into it fully, but that was the one.
So you're in high school. Now, I'm assuming you found the match some like on Daily Motion or something, in order to watch it. But
Yeah, I'm sure I did.
but then to get into New Japan, there was a high barrier of entry. You
Yeah,
couldn't find that stuff to watch live back then. We didn't have New Japan World. But
right.
even if you didn't watch it live and you kind of wanted to watch it without being spoiled, it was almost impossible
Mhm.
back then. Like what were your avenues of finding, the matches? Like how did you figure out how to watch that stuff?
Pretty much the same way I watched that first one. Daily Motion. Uh, back back in the day, matches used to pop up on Facebook a lot in like
Mhm.
Facebook groups. People would upload full matches. That's how I watched AJ versus Nakamura.
Mm.
That was most of my wrestling online was actually like Facebook groups and stuff like
Yeah.
that back then, rather than Twitter. So yeah, I found it through those means. I don't think it was until a year after Kenny Okada won that I finally jumped into New Japan World and stuff like that. Because I think I watched a full G1 or something,
Mhm.
and that's really when I started to become a full fan. But yeah, finding stuff back then, because I didn't even know New Japan World existed
Yeah.
for the longest time.
Yeah.
So yeah,
They
Facebook.
don't they don't do a good job of marketing that product, that's for sure.
No, because I think because it was on Daily Motion, so I'm sure I listened to the Japanese feed too.
Mhm.
Because no one's pulling the English feed back then either.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna chime in with some questions from folks in the Patreon. I'll just read the Discord names here
Sure.
to keep folks anonymous if they want to be anonymous. J Mess 3035. Two questions. I think you kind of already answered this first question, but you may want to add a little bit more detail, or if you would like.
Mhm.
The first one is, what match or how exactly did you get into Joshi stardom? Now, we talked about your friend who gave you the list, but
Yeah.
there was a first match that you watched on that list. Do you remember what it was?
I do. It was like so it was early stardom, so they shot it with one camera. This was so it would have been 2011, and it was a Nai Takahashi versus Arisa Shiki, which the match was maybe 8 minutes. It wasn't a big match. It was nothing. Like it was a vet versus a rookie. And for some reason I was enamored in it because the rookie kicked the veteran as hard as she could in the head, and I was just like, okay, I'm in. Um, I watched an Io Shirai match before that from Stardom, like that was free on YouTube,
Hmm.
but I'll go with that one because I just went in order. I could have picked and choose because I think a lot of people when they get into new promotions, oh, let me go see the greatest matches. I
Yeah.
literally just started at the beginning of this list that my friend gave me. And it's probably like the Takahashi versus Arisu Shiki from something 2011. I promise you, if you watched it, you'd be like, really? This is what got him into it? I don't know. One kick to the skull was like, I'm in.
Second question is, how do you set up your schedule to make sure that you're able to watch live? Or if you don't watch live, how do you make sure you stay spoiler free?
Yeah, I watch live because I am terrible at staying spoiler free. And how do I set up my schedule? I struggle through work on Mondays. So for example, this past Sunday, as of this recording, Stardom had a pay-per-view, and then Forbidden Door was at night.
Yeah.
I, would have thought, oh, let me leave this wide open window during the day so I could take a long nap.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. No, 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 no. I watched the show, slept for 3 hours, recorded one show, jumped on the power bombshells on YouTube for
That's
three
right.
hours,
That's right.
then got off, napped for maybe 30 minutes, watched Forbidden Door, recorded after Forbidden Door, then went to bed. So I don't really set up. I try to nap before Stardom shows. That's my specialty. Like, oh, okay, say it's the night before. I'm on Eastern time, so I'll go to bed at like 10, 11 p.m.
Mhm.
Hope I sleep for 2 or 3 hours. Usually roll around in bed for an hour because I'm not
Mhm.
tired at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I wake up and I watch it. I am terrible at going spoiler free. I need to watch things as soon. New Japan, I'm pretty good because I'll just wake up, watch it, won't
Mhm.
touch Twitter. That's the whole thing. That's how you stay spoiler free.
Yeah.
You don't look at Twitter. You
Yeah.
don't touch it. I also shut off Discord now because Discord,
You get the notifications.
you'll accidentally see one thing. It will be like you'll keep one chat open that has nothing to do with it, and it'll be like Kenny Omega returned to New Japan. I'll just be like, are you kidding me? I still get spoiled sometimes for some shows, but when it comes to Stardom, I never get spoiled because I'm just awake because I'm maybe a little bit psycho, but I got to do it. I feel like in a lot of ways it's like my beat almost. I'm
Mhm.
covering it for Fightful. I'm writing previews and stuff, and I want to do those reviews immediately for my show here, as you
Yeah.
guys saw, and you should go check that out if you haven't already. It's
Yeah,
over on the
the
YouTube channel.
Stardom, Sunshine show that you just put up
Yes,
the full review of on our
yes.
YouTube channel.
And if you want to listen to the MP3, that's probably on the Patreon by the time this comes out. So there you go, with a preview that's exclusive to the Patreon. See, that's how you market right there,
There you
folks.
go.
But yeah, I just, I just watch it. I wake up and I watch it, and I deal with the consequences when they come. Which was, let's just say, Monday was a tough work day.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. So Matt B425, we love Matt B. He's always commenting on content and shows that we do here. So he wants to know if you ever get nervous about doing interviews or podcasts, or have you done them enough now that it's not an issue?
I have to be the most nervous person ever when I do interviews. I freak out about interviews every time. I don't know why, because once they get started, I'm good.
Yeah,
Maybe it's the fear that they just don't happen.
right.
Like there's a real fear there for me that sometimes things just don't work out and I can't chat with whoever I'm trying to chat with. That's a real fear. And sometimes, I mean, you're sometimes you're interviewing people you watch on, and it's just like natural fear almost. But
Mhm,
when it comes
mhm.
to podcasts, not anymore. I I just press record and we go.
Yeah, yeah.
I sometimes when I first started podcasting, I would start and stop no less than 50 times.
Oh
I
my
just
gosh.
I don't know why I did it. I just overthought, and then I just stopped thinking, and that's pretty much how it happens. And sometimes you can tell when you're listening to me that I stop thinking because I'll lose my train of thought. But yeah, that it's the interviews that get me. But every time I get into them, I hopefully don't seem nervous anymore. But it's the lead up to it. It's just like, okay, I hope this goes smoothly. I hope the recording works. It's just me becoming a little worrisome along the way. But podcast, not so much. Doing live shows is my favorite thing
Yeah,
because
there's
it's
a there's you
interactive. It's people reacting to what you're saying.
get a nice
For
rush.
Yeah, the first time I ever did a live show, I was a little scared, but now that I know how to do it, it's all good.
I know Matt didn't specifically ask me about this, but I think what you said about sort of the anticipation, I think there's definitely nerves in that for
Mhm.
sure. Because the worst thing in an interview is you just don't know what to ask, or you don't have the right questions, or the
Yeah,
conversation doesn't flow and it's not going great, and then you don't have a way to get it back or to get it
yeah,
started. So
that happens.
there's some fear in that,
Mhm.
absolutely. But like Scott said, once it starts, then the other thing is I can do this with you. I
Mhm.
know you. We're just having a conversation. I may have written down like one or two things that I didn't want to forget about to talk to you about. But let's say I do an interview with somebody I don't know, and if that person isn't playing ball that day and
Yeah,
isn't trying to be conversational and isn't, isn't trying to be a good guest and be
Mhm.
entertaining, then yeah, like that's like a person's worst fear. Now, if you're recording it, you just don't publish it if it sucks. Or
Yeah.
if you're recording it so that you can write something, then then you get your quotes and you're still fine. But as long as you have a good rapport, I think it's actually something that you do look forward to. And I've had the
Yeah.
opportunity to interview, Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho, Kazuchika Okada, Cody Rhodes, like all these like really top people, obviously not because of me, but because of Dave. And that was kind of the cool thing was I would go into these shows. This is, very early on, and we're going to LA to the studio or whatever to interview Cody. And like I was just so worried about getting the thing recorded.
Yeah.
I wanted the
Yeah.
technology. And then I would go, okay, you guys are good. And then Dave is like asking me to chime in, and he's like making me feel comfortable enough to ask
Mhm.
questions. So that is also a big part of it for me, is Dave was always so giving when it came to this stuff. Because to me, I was like, people want to hear you talk to this guy.
Yeah.
And he'll be like, no, no, because I think he understands that I may be thinking something different, and the
Sure.
interviewee could give a question that would send us down a different pathway that might even be more interesting than what we were talking. So, he was very smart in that way, but that's kind of how I was kind of forced into it, because I was just like, no, like they want to hear you. And he's like, no, you can ask question one. And then he would just flat out just ask me, without me even knowing it was coming. And I was like, oh my gosh, now I got to think of something to ask this person.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's the other thing that I always say about podcasting is the more repetitions you have, the better you're going to get, because you're going to test stuff and you're going to figure out what works and what doesn't. You're going to
Yeah.
know what kind of questions work with just about everybody.
Yeah.
And, you'll also understand how to cover something. Like if the person is promoting a book or there's an
Right.
event, you always want to get that stuff out, and that person knows that you're there to work with them.
Yeah.
You're working with them, so they're more giving. So
Yeah.
all that stuff is, you kind of learn it as you do it.
Yeah. I mean, you did that Okada interview, and of course, you have to go through interpreter to make that work. I've done that a few times, and it's not it's not that I'm afraid of how that's going to go necessarily. It's just I want to make sure, that's then connections that need to work, and I'm on one side of the world, there are, Maki Ito's on the other side of the
Yeah.
world, and it's like, okay, let's just hope this works, because as much as happy I am that we are able to do these types of things, you just never know.
Yeah.
Um, and I will say, like, there are times I walk away from interviews, and this happens a lot with all my content. I walk away thinking, "Oh, that was not good. That's bad." When I feel like it was good, that doesn't happen all that much. But when I do, thankfully, it usually is good.
Uh-huh.
But I rarely walk away from things confident
You're always going
necessarily.
to be your hardest critic, though.
Oh, without a doubt. But
Except the trolls. Sometimes the trolls will just
yeah,
try to
I've learned.
critique, and then you just go, they don't, who cares
My
about
trick is if I don't get a notification on my phone, I'm probably not responding.
them?
Because I've dealt with enough people that,
Yeah.
disagree with me. But yeah, interviews are so much fun. You get to learn things from new people, and you get to talk to new people. It's that anticipation though.
Yeah.
I asked myself, did I have enough questions down just in case? Like, because the worst thing I want to do is like the interview's done in 10 minutes, and I'm like, uh-oh. Like, all right, we're done. But yeah, that's a great question, because I think we all have some sort of fear with one of these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
But as long as a microphone's in front of me, I usually feel pretty good.
All right. Matt B has two more. He
Okay.
says, how do you go about interviewing Japanese wrestlers with the language barrier? And do you feel anything is lost in translation?
One, if they're in a promotion, I reach out to the promotion, see what we can do. Finding interpreters to make the video ones happen is very difficult, because I don't know anyone personally
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. So unless the company is willing to give. It doesn't always work out. I've tried a lot of the times. And yeah, I do think there's things always lost in translation because especially with the talking ones, and this isn't any fault of anyone. This isn't the fault of the interpreter or the interviewee. It's just we're trying to get the main point out.
Yeah.
Right. That's the whole point of the interview. So there's definitely things lost in translation because, they're talking, then this person's whether they're writing it down or recording it to try to read it back. I don't know how they do it because they're, taking my questions, translating it to them, and translating back.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible what they're able to do. There's definitely things lost in translation, but I just go at it. I put in the work to make sure that I get the most out of the interviews. Written interviews work out a lot better, but even then, it's hard to find people that can translate one way for you, one way. Thankfully, I have a really kind friend that's able to translate from English to Japanese. It's the other way around that when I get the answers back, I've tried a few people. I don't. It's not that I don't want to go back to the same people. It's just sometimes I know it's not going to interest that person. I think I
Mm-hmm.
want to try to find it that may interest them so they know what the full point is, because sometimes people are saying things in interviews. Sometimes these wrestlers say things that are very direct, and maybe if you're just going to give it to a translator, maybe they're not going to understand
Mm-hmm.
that. So I think that's definitely the difficulty there. But I just go out there, I reach out to these wrestlers, and I hope for the best because I want to hear what they want to say as much as I think everyone else does. And it's a lot of fun.
All right. Last question by Matt. Do you have any serious consideration to going to Japan to cover a show live?
100%. I've talked to people many times about that. I've talked and I think it would all work out for me if I went over there. I could get, credentials and stuff like that. Thankfully, I'm connected to multiple places now,
Mm-hmm.
connected to here, Fightful, Voices of Wrestling, Wrestle Purist. Like I'm connected to a lot of places. That I think it could all work out. But yeah, that is my dream to go there for end of December into early January when it's hot in Japan, when all the wrestling shows are going, get the big Stardom show at the year end, get the Wrestle Kingdom in, just cover one of them. Even if I'm just sitting there watching it and they just say, yeah, you can stand in this special seat or sit in this special seat, that's good enough for me. But that is definitely my goal out of all this, is just get over there once. It doesn't have to be every time. If it could be every year, that'd be great. But unless someone wants to send me a lot of money too, then I'll take the ones for now. But yeah, that is my dream to do so, and I think it could all work out once I get to the point of life where I can just do that.
All right. So I have two more questions for you, and I think I just have to sort of answer this question. It's the evergreen of all evergreen wrestling podcast questions, but I think for you, it'll give us a little bit of an idea of your personality as a wrestling fan, which is what is your favorite match of all time, and not what is the best match, but what is your favorite match of all time.
Oh man, putting me on the spot. I'm always That's the one question I'm so bad at. But if I'm gonna give you like my growing up one,
Mm-hmm.
that I always go back to. That is CM Punk versus John Cena, Money in the Bank 2011. Always, forever, a special, special match to me. It has all the pomp and circumstance, with Laurinaitis running out there and Cena punching him, and he walks back into the ring. But that is the best crowd I had ever seen at the time. Still one of the best crowds I've ever seen. Um, it is a match that I watch about once a year, probably, just because it's special to me. Maybe it's not special to everyone, but that was the first time I think I ever heard of Dave Meltzer too, when it
Oh
was
wow.
over, because he gave it 5 stars, and it was the last WWE 5 star rating until like NXT did something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always that one, And then my other favorite match, which is more recent, which was in 2021, it was Utami and Shuri, the one that really blew Stardom up, that had everyone talking. Um, Maybe because it was partly with me really getting into doing all this at the same time. It was like it was perfect. It was like, I just started podcasting. The match happened. It's the highest rated women's match since I think a Toyota match, which is crazy. That's just one of my personal favorites because it was like a moment for me as a fan because I was watching it live and witnessing it live. I was witnessing the reaction live. Justin Barraza was talking about it. Everyone was talking about it, and I was sold on it when it was over. I didn't need to hear anyone else tell me it was great. But that's probably the one that's more recent that's like, yeah, I look at that match and I think it's like the most special thing ever because of um, just because of how it went. And there's like 1,000 Kenny matches if you really wanted me to go down a list, but he has a few, I'd say, that are right there. The Tetsuya Naito, like, one in the G1. It's one of my favorites too, but I'm not going to list the whole list here. I gave you 3. I think I gave you 3 of hitting all my tastes.
All right, and the last question, again, to try and acquaint the audience to your personality a little bit. This is going to be about non-wrestling stuff.
Sweet.
Is there a TV show, a movie, a podcast, a book outside of wrestling that you really liked, that you're really interested in? If you haven't sort of dug into it yet, is kind of caught your fancy, but something outside of wrestling that you can recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big TV show fan. I love like serious type dramas that, have my heart beating out of my chest, kind of like wrestling matches can sometimes. The top show I'd name that I'd recommend is probably Peaky Blinders.
Oh,
I
wow.
love Peaky Blinders. That's one of my favorite shows of all time. I don't want to say like Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones. I'm just gonna guess most people have seen
Yeah.
those by now. So Peaky Blinders, absolutely. It's just there's something about it. It's a different every season. I think that's why I really like it. I think Murphy, I can't think of his first name, is phenomenal in that show. And you didn't ask about sports, but sports are also my thing. That's why I always have a sports hat on. I'm born and I have never lived my life outside of the state of Massachusetts. So 24 years, you can imagine I've had a pretty good time as a sports fan.
Absolutely.
It's a little rough sometimes now, except for the Celtics. But yeah, that TV and sports are my hobbies outside of it, and I've been pretty lucky on the sports side of things.
Yeah, and there's, sports is seasonal, but if you follow the 3 big ones, and then we can include hockey. I don't know if you're a Bruins fan.
All of them.
Like, it's nonstop. It's all year round.
Yeah, I mean, baseball gets a little tough because the Red Sox stink, and have for a few years now, but it is nonstop. And the beauty of it, I'm a big football fan, big Patriots fan. I don't miss games. I don't miss Patriots games. That's like the one thing that I put a focus on out of all the sports. Like, I need to watch Patriots game at 1:00 Eastern on Sundays every single week. It's just, and that helps growing up as a Tom Brady fan. It's a lot tougher now, I'll tell you that. I don't like life without him, but yeah, the Patriots are the team that I just grasped onto, and a lot of us did. But sports are all year round, like you said, and I mean, when you live in a place like Boston, it's pretty sports heavy.
Yeah.
You got to know your stuff. I've worked in sports, so it's something I really do love outside of wrestling.
If there was a big time Stardom show and a Pats game on at the same time, would you choose the Pats game?
Thankfully, that'll never happen.
Yeah,
because of timing. But it depends what the Pats game is. If they're playing like I don't know, the Jags, maybe not. Like,
Tony Khan just frowned right now.
well, old
You know
Jags.
why? He just frowned.
Now I'd watch the Jags, but like I wanted to say the Jets, but they have Aaron Rodgers now. But like if they was playing a bad team, there'd be a conversation. But if it's like a primetime Patriots game, I might double task, might do the double task and go back and really watch the wrestling show after. But
is it a family thing with you in sports as well? That's the big part of it.
Me and my dad. I watch every Patriots game with him for a lot of my life. I worked in sports the past year and a half, so I was working on Sundays, so that changed that up. But now that I have a normal human being job, I'll get back to watching them, so I'm pretty excited. Yeah, but it's a big sports thing, always has been. Patriots, that Tom Brady is pretty good.
Yep, he's really good. You know that Tom Brady grew up not that far away from me.
I do. He grew up San Fran fan, big Joe Montana guy. Happy he came here, not there.
I know. Gosh, could have been a lot different. But yeah, I think I want to say he's 1 year behind me in high school, and there's a possibility that we played a game together in baseball. I wouldn't know for sure, but I did play his high school. When I was a senior, we played in like some winter league games or something that it's possible that he played in.
I played against like one major leaguer once. I don't even remember the name in baseball. But that's my claim to fame. Wasn't close to Tom Brady.
Well, one of my really good friends, his famous story is that he knew Tom when they were growing up, and he knew Tom's family. I think he still knows like the sisters or something like on Facebook. But they were playing Babe Ruth League, and I think Tom got a little bit of the tummy troubles, and he didn't have a way to get home, and so he borrowed my buddy's bike so that he could quickly go relieve himself and come back to the game. That's the claim to fame.
That's a hell of a claim to fame. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, but back then it was all Tommy. It wasn't.
Yes,
Tom.
Tommy.
It was Tommy.
It's professional.
All right, so on Twitter at Scott the letter E Wrestling. Obviously, the host of the 5 Star Joshi Show on the Patreon, and Scott's been putting out a lot more content on YouTube as well. So kind of getting both the free eyeballs and the Patreon subscriber ears. Tell everyone else where they can find you in other places. You've mentioned Fightful, you've mentioned Voices of Wrestling. Like, do you have a rhyme or reason when you post there? Is there a schedule where people know that content is coming out from you?
Yeah, so Fightful, that is interviews and just like Stardom results, Stardom news. I do all that for Fightful. So if it's interviews aren't on a schedule, I wish they were. I wish I could say my life was that easy and people were like, oh yeah, I'll line up and do an interview for you. Not so much. But so that's what I do for Fightful. Voice of Wrestling, I preview every Stardom show. So this week's another Stardom pay-per-view. There'll be a preview over there. I write some features for them sometimes if I'm feeling some spur of the moment type thing. That's always fun. The best thing I ever wrote was on Voices of Wrestling, at least in my personal opinion, which was about Julia's 5-star win last year. So I do that. I'm also with Wrestle Purist. I write some features for them about a little bit of everything, so that's fun for me because
Wrestle Purists is such an interesting group of people, but
they're impressive.
They are killing it on YouTube. It is ridiculous how many views that they get for their stuff. So kudos.
They're beyond impressive. They I applaud them. I mean, I guess I write for them, so I'm technically part of the team, but I do applaud the YouTube crew. They just have a following that loves them, and I think it's great. And then right here, right? Fight Game Media. That's where you can find my podcast every single week. I have like a lot of podcasts, to be fair. I also have a history podcast for Stardom. You can check that out, Stardom Road, if you want to hear me talk that every other week. Stardom's my bag. When I say Joshi, Joshi's also my bag. I cover all Joshi, but I do my best of trying to keep everyone in the Stardom mold. I feel like with Stardom Growing, Stardom Road might be a good podcast for you if you want to learn a little bit about some things going on there. But if you want to keep up to date with Stardom, I'm always right here on the Patreon doing that for you.
There you go.
So make sure to check that out if you haven't. And thank you everyone for listening to me banter for 50 minutes. I appreciate that.
And I want to thank you for doing such a fantastic job. And when Parker decided to step away for real life stuff, you were right there, and you're like, I still want to do this. Like, I can do this even if it's by myself. I'll find other people. Parker will come back sometime. So, thank you for picking up that ball and keeping it going, because I think people really, really enjoy that show on this network, and I think it makes us pretty unique. And hopefully down the line, it adds to the subscribers, and more people want to. That's I'm kind of hoping that, obviously Mercedes kind of brings more eyeballs to it, but just, that there are moments with Stardom and other Joshi companies where it's like, oh, like it's just going to grow. And they've grown tremendously. Stardom has grown tremendously in the last several years. So that's always good, because then more people will be interested, and we will have somebody to give you information on how to get started, because you've done a few of those podcasts out there on the free network. And I
Yes.
imagine you will continue to do more of those for YouTube and such as well. So that is, thank you for doing this, being the first person to kick off this Getting to Know the Fight Game Media Network podcast personalities series that I plan on doing. So for Scott, I am Double G. We'll see you when we see you. Peace out.